Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
And I get the feeling you've been cheated.
It is Monday, October 30th, 2023. My name is Sam Seder. This is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Brian Merchant, tech columnist at the Los Angeles Times, author of Blood and the Machine, The Origins of the Rebellion Against Big Tech. Also on the program today, Israel's ground forces go deeper into northern Gaza as 2 million plus Palestinians are stuck in a terrorized blackout. U.S. calls for civilian protections as it refuses to publicly call for Israel to cease fire. Israeli hostage families demand Netanyahu prioritize hostage safety over killing Palestinian civilians.
No can do.
Small.
Sorry.
House Republicans announce a standalone Israel aid bill will get a vote on Thursday as Mitch McConnell fumes in the Senate. Stellantis and just breaking GM reached tentative deals with the UAW in what is looked like a historic union win. Bigger than historic. Super historic. Mike Pence no longer hanging with the Republican hopefuls, yeah. Came up with that all myself. Donald Trump with a commanding lead in Iowa as arguments being offered in Colorado as to legal arguments, we should say, whether he should be kicked off the ballot. George Santos pleads not guilty to 10 charges, but House may end up expelling him nevertheless. And the EPA fashioning a rule requiring utilities to actively replace lead drinking pipes, not just notify, but to replace. We shall see. All this and more on today's Majority Report. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for joining us. It is another Monday, and obviously we spent the weekend. Emma Vigland, welcome. Monday fun day-ish.
Oh man, yes.
My weekends are now measured based upon how many fights did I manage to avoid getting into this weekend about Israel and Gaza.
I did not succeed on that front, I'll say. But I'm trying. I went to the rally. I went to a ceasefire rally, which was wonderful. So amazing to see so many people come out in Brooklyn, started from the Brooklyn Museum, headed to the bridge. I kind of dipped out before the bridge crossing. But it's a beautiful thing to be around like-minded people like that, and just to see how global some of these demonstrations are going, and how many, Jewish Voice for Peace activists are there as well. And they had just done that incredible Grand Central demonstration the night before. So I was very moved to see so many people out in Brooklyn.
Yeah, it does seem like at least in certain quarters that you're seeing protests, you're seeing people come out. Here is a clip of This is from, I guess,
Friday.
Friday. Shoot, I didn't have it. It's number 6. This is in Grand Central Station, and we have 2 clips. The first are demonstrators in support of a ceasefire. You can hear that now. We'll listen to this. This is pretty impressive. I mean, that place is full. And then this is a clip of Rosalind Paczewski, Hunter College professor, and discussing why she is protesting.
Palestinians have been the victims of oppression for 75 years, and it has to stop. That's why we're here, to say not in our name. I am older than the state of Israel.
There's Jewish prayers in the background. The sun is going down, and it's the Jewish Sabbath.
It is. And on Shabbat, we have to pray. We have to recommit ourselves to justice. I believe that Judaism and Jewish ethics, this is how I grew up thinking, are about justice and about Rabbi Hillel's statement, if I am not for myself, who am I? And if I'm only for me, what am I doing here? I glossed over it a little bit. And if not now, when? Now. Peace now. Ceasefire now. President Biden and Blinken, listen to what people are telling you, especially the young people and lots of Jews.
Not in our name is what they're chanting there. It really is amazing. And these are the biggest peace demonstrations definitely in the U.S. since the Iraq War.
Without a doubt.
Without a doubt. And, people will ask, well, we didn't see certain groundswells, even for, like, say, the Ukrainian people, for example. But the nature of protests is that you protest what your government is doing. And I think what some people miss is that this is actively being funded and perpetrated by the United States government, and that's what is so outrageous to so many people, is that and for the Jews there, I don't want to speak for them, but they're saying not in our name. Don't commit these atrocities in our name, using our grief to commit what 800 international scholars are calling crimes of genocide at this point, at the very least mass murder. And then from the American perspective, these are where our tax dollars are going. That's where our tax dollars are going. And I think that is really at the core of this here. A child in Gaza right now is dying every 10 minutes? Or am I undercounting that there? Either way, it's 3,500 children that we know of dead already.
Yeah, and it's hard to imagine that the numbers that we're getting aren't undercounts, frankly.
Yeah.
The ridiculousness that the Biden administration is claiming that they can't trust numbers generated by the Hamas-led government is absurd. They've never had that disposition before. And again, to the extent that there's any type of confirmation, Ryan Grimm was on the program Friday, and I think he also did a podcast released after that show, where he has a direct contact with someone with family or presence in Gaza, who had a list of 40 some odd family members who had been killed, and it matched up with the list that the House of Ministry, Health and Ministry had put out, I guess, on Thursday. And so, to the extent that there's any way to verify these things, but if the Israeli and American government really wanted more verification, they could send people in to count. Now, of course, those people would be in mortal danger because we know already that UN aid workers have been killed, journalists, at least a dozen now, I think we're up to, have been killed. So they won't do that. And it is hard to look at the sort of the rubble in Gaza and say they've found every dead person. It's absurd. It really is absurd.
Yeah, and ceasefire. I mean, the idea that it still is so few members of the Democratic Party calling for it. It's absolutely insane to me. But the demonstrations are working. I mean, I do feel that there is movement on this. It's not fast enough. Many more people will die before anything changes. But if you take your foot up off the gas now, that this will be able to continue. And like, I love the idea too. What you're saying, Sam, is you could let people in to independently verify these things, but they don't want to. They don't want any information coming out. That's why there was the internet blackout, which is a practice that the United States has had historically condemned when done in other atrocities internationally. They let it go on for 36 hours until supposedly Biden pressured the government to restore internet access.
And to be honest, I haven't seen necessarily independent verification that internet access has been restored. And, you know, it's one thing to restore internet access, but if there is if there's no power, and there's no safe place from the bombing, and we know that everywhere in northern Gaza is just being literally like razed to the ground. But we also know by the admission of Israeli officials that the south is being bombed as well. And
there's violence in the West Bank too.
And we're not even talking about what's going on in the West Bank. There were calls that went out last night. Did we get a follow up on that area? I don't know if we did. There was a village that apparently was like on the brink of suffering a pogrom in the West Bank. That, according to the Israeli B'Tselem, the Israeli peace organization. But we also know there have been dozens, not now close to 100 Palestinians killed in the past couple of weeks in the West Bank. Which incidentally, of course, there's no Hamas there. So.
Okay. So media, stop calling this the Israel-Hamas war. I'm sick of this at this point. This is an indiscriminate bombing campaign on a largely civilian population. They understand they're killing civilians. They're doing so on purpose. Netanyahu is going out publicly and calling this Palestinians with the Amalek, invoking these biblical tropes.
We'll play that
we
video
will later, but
yeah.
Just let's go, people. Let's catch up to what's actually happening and listen to Jewish Voice for Peace.
Good to see those. Good to see those protesters. And, you know, keep at it. Got a couple of words from our sponsors. Always sort of awkward to although I will say it's the only thing that's keeping me sort of like standing right now. Mm-hmm. Emma has a full bag of cashews. You want to show those?
I do.
From nuts.com.
Look at that. I've been needing cashews and just have been lazy to pick them up, but now we have a new sponsor that's going to keep me stocked.
And that's the thing. Nuts.com is more or less like, you know, walking into like Willy Wonka's candy factory. Nuts.com not only has tons of nuts, obviously, it's in their name. I've got a mixed bag of nuts over there and some almonds. And some of those like maple glazed walnuts.
The glazed ones, the sweet stuff's going to get you.
Very concerned about that.
Yes.
But they also have tons of candies like butterscotch and sort of like classic ones, fudge, licorice. They also have a ton of stuff like powders that you would put into your protein shakes. They've got stuff for cooking and baking. They've got dried fruit. It is nuts.com is basically a one-stop shop for any of those things in your pantry. Snacks for the kids, snacks for your office, This is a bulk situation too. You can get stuff. So if you maybe have a small restaurant or like a juice bar or something like that, they have specialty flours. It's really, I was going to say nuts, but it's nuts.com.
It's really nuts.com.
Also, you should know nuts.com, quality is top priority. They roast their nuts, they pop their corn in the same day that it ships. So when it reaches you, it's deliciously fresh. Satisfaction's guaranteed. We've got examples of it, right? We've been eating it all morning, frankly. There's just so many things on there. And all the nuts, I'm trying to do mostly like raw nuts now. Mm-hmm. That's basically my big thing. Because it's incredibly healthy for you. And the beauty about raw nuts is you don't eat them as much.
Right. It's there for the sustenance.
Yep. But they have, nuts.com has gluten-free options. They've got organic choices. They've got other diet-friendly products. Doesn't matter if you're looking for something sweet or something savory, or you need to stock up on everyday cooking essentials. Nuts.com is where you're going to find it. You can shop a la carte, or you can get free auto deliveries. So you never run out. Very helpful if your kids are eating that kind of stuff and they're rating Mila came home last weekend and all of a sudden all of the snacks I had bought for Saul, gone. Like literally just gone. Every single thing in the house. Right now, nuts.com is offering new customers a free gift with a purchase and free shipping on orders of $29 or more at nuts.com/majority. Check it out. All the delicious options, nuts.com/majority. You'll get a free gift and you'll get free shipping when you spend $29 or more. Link is in the podcast and YouTube descriptions. Also, holidays are coming up. And that doesn't, if you got a business, or if you're sending out a bunch of cards, stamps.com should be on your wish list, as it were. Why? Because stamps.com is your own personal post office. Doesn't matter where you are. All you need with stamps.com is a computer and a printer. They'll even send you a free scale, so you'll have everything you need to get started. You're sending stuff to your grandkids across the country. You send them to your grandparents across the country. Doesn't matter. And if you got a business that's going to be starting to move product this time of year, stamps.com is going to make it much easier for you. If you need a package pickup, you can schedule it through your stamps.com dashboard. If you sell products online, stamps.com seamlessly connects with every major marketplace and shopping cart. Plus, they have premium discounts. So you can order shipping and mailing supplies, labels, even printers from the stamps.com supply store. And then you get huge carrier discounts up to 84% with UPS or the U.S. Postal Service. So you're saving money. And stamps.com on the dashboard will tell you the least expensive way to send it. USPS, UPS, they calculate the rates and boom, you're set up. Stamps.com has been around for 25 years. They've been indispensable for over 1 million businesses. Back in the day when we were shipping out DVDs, yeah, actually this show has been around long enough that we were shipping DVDs when you signed up. It was stamps.com that's basically saved me. And Mila, she stuffed them into the envelopes. But I had these massive things I was taking down to the post office. And then I was like, oh, I don't need to do that anymore.
Do it from home.
Yep. That's what makes it really easy. And it doesn't matter if you wanted to post out, print out postage at 2 a.m. If you're a night owl, stamps.com. Doesn't matter. 24/7, 365. Give your business the gift of stamps.com so your mailing and shipping is covered for the holiday season. Sign up with the promo code Majority Report for a special offer. It includes a 4-week trial, free postage, and a digital scale. There is no long-term commitments or contracts. Just go to stamps.com, click the microphone at the top of the page, enter the code Majority Report. And lastly, you guys know this. I've been mentioning this. One of the things I'm trying to do, obviously we need public policy for this type of stuff, but it helps, and it certainly makes me feel better to try and cut down on the amount of plastic that I am buying and throwing out, essentially, even if I'm recycling it. And one of the ways that I have done that is gotten like all sorts of type of refillable containers, and less I am having to rely on buying like the big plastic containers of like cleaning fluids. Most cleaning formulas are 90% water anyways. And then you get them in these massive things, particularly like laundry detergent. It's nuts. So the shipping associated with having to ship those big things, and just the hassle from bringing it from the supermarket and then having it in your apartment, it's taking up half the apartment, and then having it end up in the ocean or wherever these plastics end up going. It's just a messed up system. Totally lose-lose. Well, Blue Land is on a mission to eliminate single-use plastic by reinventing cleaning essentials to be better for you and the planet. This is, it's a simple idea, right? Just endlessly refillable cleaning products with a good-looking design that looks great on your counter. You just fill your bottles with water. You drop in tablets, tiny tablets. Wait for them to dissolve. That means like all sorts of cleaning supplies. You're not going to have to get on your grocery run. Refills start at just $2.25. You can even set up a subscription, which is what I do because I can't remember to do anything. Or you buy in bulk for additional savings. They got cleaning sprays. They got hand soaps. They got toilet bowl cleaner. And the big thing for me is the laundry tablets. All Blue Land products are made with clean ingredients you can feel good about. This is where we're all headed. You got to cut down on all those big plastics. Completely unnecessary. You're probably using too much of that laundry detergent anyways. Mm-hmm. But this is, if you live in an apartment, you're brain dead if you don't do this. But if you care about also all the plastic you're doing, you should do it anywhere. Blue Land has a special offer for our listeners right now. You get 15% off your first order by going to blueland.com/majority. Check this out. You don't want to miss it. Blueland.com/majority for 15% off. That's blueland.com/majority. Get 15% off. We'll put a link in the podcast and YouTube description. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back with Brian Merchant, tech columnist at the LA Times, author of Blood in the Machine, The Origins of Rebellion Against Big Tech. We are back. Sam Seder, Emma Vigeland on the Majority Report. Want to welcome to the program Brian Merchant. He is the tech columnist at the Los Angeles Times and author of Blood in the Machine, The Origins of the Rebellion Against Big Tech. Brian, welcome to the program.
Thanks so much for having me.
So for a long time, I think, and certainly because I'm old enough to have been like sort of one of those generations that was not native computer. There was a lot of adoption of technology basically since, I was starting in college. Computers and just like all sorts of gizmos and cable television and even like non-clickable remote controls. And the term Luddite got thrown around a lot as somebody who just like was afraid of technology I subsequently learned that wasn't the case, but your book really lays it out. Just broadly, let's just start with that. What does being a Luddite actually mean?
Yeah, it's a big mischaracterization, and it's lasted decades and decades. So certainly, no one should feel bad about getting the term wrong. It's like the default now. But a Luddite is not anti-technology. The original Luddites were, a lot of them were technologists themselves, right? They were technicians. They knew exactly how the technology of the day worked. They had their hands on it. They were hackers, you could even argue, in their day. But what they protested was the way that it was being used by bosses against them. So the way that it was being used to sort of exploit them or to degrade wages or specifically to take their jobs or to move their jobs into factories against their will. So a Luddite is somebody who protests an exploitative use of technology, often, very justifiably so.
Do you and I want to get? I mean, you've written an excellent history of the genesis of this and how how that battle was waged at the time. I want to get into that, but do you think? And maybe I'm getting ahead of myself, but do you think that the reason that it was not a mistake that we misinterpret the term Luddite, that the sort of the class issue associated with it, the exploitation associated with it, had been drained from the popular understanding of what that word meant, and it just became some old fuddy-duddy who was just afraid to change his or her ways?
Yeah, no, 100%. You could even go as far as to say it was a propaganda effort by the crown and by sort of the elites of the day to very intentionally paint Luddites in this way. And the victors write the history books, so they the crown sort of, and we'll talk about all this, I'm sure, but they raised troops, tens of thousands of troops. They occupied the districts where the Luddites were rebelling, and they put them down by force. And all this was accompanied by this sort of PR campaign where the crown was issuing proclamations saying, oh, these deluded men, they know not what they do. They're probably under the influence of some malign force. And, they were really painting them as backwards looking and dumb from the get-go. And if you think about, who that benefits, if you're somebody who might protest the way technology is being used to sort of slash your wages to profit somebody else, then yeah, it's really convenient to have a word in your pocket, to have a term in your pocket. Oh, he's just a Luddite, that you can write them off and dismiss those complaints, dismiss those real concerns with what's happening, and sort of dismiss them. And that's basically been the case ever since for 200 years. The elite class has had this very handy way of dismissing anybody who protests a potentially exploitative use of technology or a system of control that is being used against them. And they can trot out the term Luddite, and it's worked for decades and decades.
And so the story, your story, basically starts in the early 19th century, as we're starting to see these new technologies rolled out. At the time, obviously, these new technologies really had more to do with sort of the manufacture of textiles more than anything else. But set the stage for us.
Yeah, so you could kind of consider this to be the dawn of the Industrial Revolution. So we're not quite yet at the stage where you have the classic sort of portrait of the cities choked with smog and just lined with factories. And we're sort of at the early stages where that is taking shape. So in the 1700s, you have a series of machines that are invented with the explicit purpose of sort of saving labor or doing the work that somebody might do, or at least automating it, as we would call it today. That term didn't exist then. They would call it mechanization. But things like the spinning jenny, the water frame, things that are producing yarn, things that are producing knit goods, things that are producing woven goods, all to do with cloth production, basically. And then after sort of the laissez-faire movement, and Adam Smith comes along and kind of makes an explicit case for why you should divide labor and into sort of a system that would become the factory system. A lot of entrepreneurs and sort of industrialists of the day sort of take this as a starting pistol, as a firing gun, to really start relentlessly kind of organizing work into a factory system, where before, for hundreds of years, you still had the machinery and you still were working with machinery, but you would do it in your home or in a workshop if you were a cloth worker. And cloth workers were the biggest industrial worker base of the entire nation. It was cloth workers, textile workers, and agricultural workers. That was pretty much the base of Britain's major workforce. And they were working in the domestic system, and you had a pretty decent life, right? So if you were working in the cottage at home, the term cottage industry comes from this period because it was pretty nice. You're working with your family. You can sing songs. You're working with your friends. You can take a break when you want to. You can stroll in your garden. You're not, at the whims of somebody else. So at the turn of the century we start to see an accelerated drive in the early 1800s. We start to see this push by entrepreneurs and sort of factory owners and people sort of interested in making a lot of money in kind of tearing up this old set of social contracts that used to govern life, used to sort of make a community tick, in favor of moving a bunch of jobs into one factory where they had control, where they could amass all these machines, some of which had kind of been around, some which were new, but the biggest thing was the way that they were being put to use. And that was to sort of automate this work. And instead of getting skilled workers, they would really try to get, child laborers or unskilled workers, migrant workers, vulnerable workers to sort of do the work. So you still needed people to run the machines, but it was a way to cut the cost of the labor by sort of getting somebody who wasn't skilled, who hadn't trained in the trade, who would churn out an inferior product, but you could make more of them. So yeah, the Luddites. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, before we get into Luddites, I'm just curious. Yeah. How much of that so-called entrepreneurship was pressured is the wrong word, but fed by the growing sort of like slave trade in the U.S. and the increase in production in cotton that starts, around 1800, the late 1700s, through the next 5 or 6 decades, because you're going from something like, I can't remember, a couple 100,000, bales of cotton a year to like millions of bales a year over the course of those decades. So as that like sort of picking capacity comes, because we're getting more and more slaves in this country, the cotton gets picked. It gets financed from up north in this country, and then shipped for essentially, to be produced in Britain. Yeah.
So the two trends are just intensely and deeply related. They are happening at the same time, and in fact, I dedicate a chapter in the book to sort of the automation of the cotton production trade, and I call it one of the great sort of original sins of automation, and one of the greatest sort of technological unintended consequences in all of history, this side of the atomic bomb, probably, because when Eli Whitney was building the cotton gin, he at least outwardly was saying, when I build this device that's going to automate sort of the process of basically cleaning cotton and preparing it for export, that required a lot of slave labor. And he believed that, if we automate this process, then we can get rid of all those jobs, and it'll probably be a great boon to the project of abolishing slavery. So that's one reason you should back this up. It's not what happened at all, of course. Like, actually, at that point, when he's developing this machine, the institution of slavery was kind of at a vulnerable point. There was a strong abolition movement, and and sort of the case for relying on slavery was waning. But he invents this machine, starts trotting it out to the southern cotton producers, and what happens? It just blows up the demand for cotton, because now it can speed the process by which it's cleaned. So you need a lot more input, and all of a sudden the demand for more enslaved people explodes, because you have to have more people picking the cotton. So basically it gives slavery a new lease on life for another 50 years at that point. And the plantation owners are actually taking cues from the British factory system that had been imported first from England and then into the West Indies, and then we see it arrive in the United States, where they're really dividing labor in a much more intense way, and they have the overseers really ratchet up the amount of sort of contact that they have with the enslaved people, really driving them much harder. We see this transition to a system where it was still awful. The slavery was always awful, but the enslaved people were expected to sort of pick and produce cotton on their own terms. And then you see the gang system of slavery, where it's really sort of organized like a factory. And then this huge surplus of cotton then is exported back to England, where boom, they have a huge surplus of raw materials that now they need more people and more machinery to produce. So that in turn feeds sort of the rise of especially the Manchester cotton industry, where they have to sort of there's a big opportunity, quote unquote, to sort of produce more cotton goods. So they really start seeing mechanization ramp up there.
I'm just gonna. I wonder if we ever have seen an increase, an introduction of technology where it supposedly will eliminate certain bad elements, whatever, within the production chain. But in fact, what they always do, it seems to me, is just increase productivity in whatever is the easiest way possible. And that invariably means we keep that bad thing and maybe often like multiply it. I mean, we could see it from everything, faxes, when faxes were introduced, like, this is going to save, you time at work. But in fact, that time just ends up getting gobbled up. It always seems to be that dynamic.
Yep. Since day one, this is the story of automation. It promises the elimination of the human element, and it promises a streamlined, sleek sort of production system that's going to be great, because we're going to eliminate these repetitive, dirty, dangerous jobs that people have to do, and it'll be great. We'll replace it. Almost never is that the case. There are always not only unintended consequences, but the employer or the boss who's instituting these. 9 times out of 10, this is being instituted by a company or a corporation whose primary drive is to maximize profits. So he's not going to let any of those productivity gains go back to the worker. He's going to capture them all himself. I mean, even John Maynard Keynes, like the most famous and influential economist of the last 100 years, he thought that the way that the trajectories were pointing of automation and technological productivity, he thought by the time the 21st century rolled around, that humans would be working a 10-hour work week, if they wanted to. Because he saw how productive machinery was, and he saw, just the potential there. But of course, that's not what happened. Of course, the owners captured all those gains, profited mightily off of them, and just ratcheted up the amount of work that most people had to do. This has been the case since the first factories made by the the grandfather of the factory, Richard Arkwright, who I talk about in the book. I kind of call him the first tech titan. It's a loose term, but I think it works. And he was basically using children to produce yarn with his automated water frame. And instead of, lessening the burden on the previous population that was making yarn, it's this far more laborious and dangerous work regimen that's, because he just keeps ratcheting up the amount of productivity that he expects to see. And you can draw a clear line all the way through today with Amazon, with all of these productivity gains that they hope to get by having this intense sort of, it's almost this worker surveillance software where they kind of gamify the workplace, and you have to, they basically treat you, the worker, like a robot, where you have to hit X number of productivity goals and you get points for doing this or that, or you lose them if you take too long going to the bathroom. So there's always, new regimens that are promising to sort of, bring some great benefit through technology. And almost always, if the worker is not involved in the process of how that technology is developed or deployed, if they have no say in how it's actually going to be used in their workplaces and in their lives, then it will be used essentially against them, and they will have to fight to claw back those gains. Sorry.
It seems like that is the concern really with AI right now, right? I mean, you can copy and paste this historical conversation into the current context where like 95% of the articles I see about artificial intelligence are either it's being promoted by somebody who is a Google executive when you click on the bio, or it's about we really need to be worried about how artificial intelligence could take over the world and become smarter than humans, like as if it's a sci-fi book, versus the very practical realities that you are engaging in, which is the anti-worker element, and that's largely glossed over unless you're reading some sort of leftist publication.
Yeah. No, 100%. Yeah, that's exactly what I think that their intent is to move the goalpost so far down that they want us worrying about whether or not it's going to become Skynet and not the more mundane things that it's built to do, which is basically workplace automation. That's what they're trying to get it to do. I mean, if you look at, so all these companies in the last few months have just ratcheted up this huge valuation. They're getting more and more money from Amazon, from Google, from Microsoft. They're all investing in these AI companies or starting their own. And the only way that they can really ever hope to sort of turn a profit, it's not going to be through some guy messing around and making a few images every week on Dolly or something. No, they're going to have to sell this to enterprises, to companies. They're going to have to sell enterprise tier software that promises some degree of labor savings, of automation. So while they're talking about, we don't want AI to become sentient and murder us all on the world stage, they're going around and talking to medium-sized small businesses, tech companies going, hey, our Copilot system could probably automate 1/3 of your software staff right now, your software development team. And they're doing that over and over and over across the country. And they're making this promise. It's not always true. It's not like that the AI is ready to be unleashed and to just take the jobs, but that's the case that they're making. They're basically making the case that they can, cut your head count in your staff. They can automate jobs. They can save you money through software automation. And that's going to be the pitch. It's going on mostly behind closed doors right now. But you talk to an illustrator, a copywriter, someone who does freelance work, they're on the front lines of this. They'll say already they've seen the amount of work that their clients are asking them to do has already diminished. Say if they're an illustrator and they used to work with a big company that made their ad decks with an artist, now they can use Midjourney. And especially if it's not public facing, where they're not going to get called out on it, that's where a lot of this stuff is already turning.
I mean, I think that's what I appreciate about, the looking back to the origins of the rollout of this, because it makes it really clear. It's clear in that moment, it seems to me, that this is the enterprise that is rolling this thing out, whatever it is. The guy who's trying to produce clothes at the turn of the century. There is a political decision that is being made. It is, how are we going to deploy our resources within the context of this enterprise? And when this new element comes in, are all the people involved in the enterprise going to share in the benefits of that new element? That new element being the machine, and the invariably, you can see it right here. Why people talk about the need for democratizing the workplace is because you have one person or one entity or one potential benefactor of the multiple benefactors associated with that: the community, the workers, the customer, and the owners, and then maybe subsequently shareholders. And invariably, it goes to the owner and the shareholder. Period. End of story. Much and is often leveraged to take more away from the customer, more away from the community, and more away from the worker. Not just even leave them at status quo. But let's talk about George Miller, since we're back there. Who was that guy, and what did he do?
Yeah, George Miller was a young man in his early 20s who had just finished the 7 years of apprenticeship that you had to undertake to become part of the cloth trade, which it's important to say. It's like, so these are, difficult and skilled trades to learn, but these are also kind of like controls that are on the industry to make sure that, it's somewhat regulated. And he emerges from those 7 years. He also did a stint, fighting the war there's a decades-long war that was going on, and he's a veteran of the war against Napoleon. And he kind of comes of age just at this moment where all of these entrepreneurs and industrialists are really kind of hitting the gas on factorization, on automation, on using machines to sort of clumsily do the work that he's done, and he's sort of built his entire life around, or the expectation of his life. He's such a young man, and he is also he's very charismatic. He's well liked in town, and he also has a pulse on what's going on in the community, and what he sees really alarms him and depresses him and sort of enrages him, because he sees sort of very clearly the way that things are going, and that's the factory owners are setting up shop outside of town, and they're concentrating labor, they're concentrating profits at the direct expense of people, down the street. And to your point, that's one reason that I was so drawn to this example, is because it does sort of really it renders things in a pretty stark light. It's pretty, we don't have globalization. You don't have these sort of super diverse economies. A lot of these cloth districts had towns where that was the good work in the town. You went to work as a cloth dresser or a finisher or a weaver. You learned the trade. And, of course, there were other trades that were associated, but that was the heart of the trade. You couldn't really change job. It's not like, things today get a little bit muddied up where it's like, if something, if you're a taxi driver and you've spent 50 years, learning the streets of New York, and along comes Uber, people say like, oh, well, why don't you just go get another job? This, I feel like kind of clarifies just what is going on throughout all those sort of like webs of globalization and sort of the murk that is cast over the economy today, because you don't have another choice in those days. You see the factory that's taking all the jobs. It's right down the street. You see your friends who now cannot feed their families. And to them, this is an immoral choice. It is not complicated. They said they're stealing our bread, because they're building a machine, and the point is to make money at the expense of somebody else. And it was not, it was not like, well, they're innovating, so, what are you going to, no, we could have figured out a way to balance this, but instead somebody made the decision to hit the gas, to accelerate the rate that they were making profits at the expense of somebody else. So this is what Mellor says, right? He says, if we don't put a stop to this, the tendency's all one way, and pretty soon there's going to be nobody left in this country except these elite few people, and everybody else, kind of scrambling for scraps. So he becomes one of the leading Luddite figures, and we can talk about the genesis and the movement of all that, but he fights back, basically. I
wanted to make this one note too about how, because of the sort of starkness of this example, the one thing that occurred to me too was that you also at that time did not have the excuse of like, well, a company has a fiduciary responsibility to maximize the profit for their shareholders. So what else are they going to do? Like it shows that, in fact, we probably have statutes that say that now so that people can't say you have a choice. And like those, they're there to have basically taken the idea that we have a choice with these things.
Yeah.
And just in the way that a government is really just our economy is political. We decide how we're going to redistribute value in our society every day. That's all that's going on. It's just a series of decisions as to who's going to be the winner, who's going to be the loser, and everything else is just sort of like built to obfuscate those series of choices. And when you go back and look at the corporation, the businesses at that time, you realize these are just choices. And, people who are participating on Meller's side are saying like, that's a bad choice for us. And there is no laws that say you have to do it this way or that way. That will come later, so that obscures the fact that these choices are being made. And it's because it's a private industry. It's even that less democratic, although, we still had a ways to go in terms of democracy at that time. I mean, we still do, but now, but yes, talk about the genesis of the Luddites and Ned Ludd, as it were.
Yeah. And just a quick point there too, 100% that there are a series of choices. And I would just underline that extends to the technology too. How we build technology, how we position it, who we decide benefits and profits from it. Those are all choices, human choices made by these people too. So it's not like it's a separate realm where we have this like bottled lightning and we have to figure out, we choose every step of the way how we build that stuff and how we want it to sort of factor into society. And that is what the Luddites were protesting against, because they saw the machinery that was being used to sort of just exacerbate inequality, to kind of lead to suffering of some at the benefit of a few. And they said, we are not, again, even in the day, they were not against all machinery or even the specific machinery. They were just against how it was used. And they said, we are against the machinery that's hurtful to commonality. And that quote really has stuck with me because, it's a pretty good barometer to gauge, whether a technology is going to be something that's going to either cause protest or is going to be good for people at large. Is it hurtful to commonality? And if it, and they found a number of machinery that they felt was, and that was the machinery that they ended up smashing. And the way that they smashed it is this. So in 1811, all the stuff we've been talking about today comes to a head. It's the technology has reached a point where a lot of the entrepreneurs are interested in really sort of organizing it in their factories and sort of really sort of hitting the gas on deploying it. But there's also this big trade depression, because there's a war going on with France, and it was one of the very first sort of trade sanctions imposed by a government. The British Crown puts a trade sanction on and England cannot do business with anybody that's an ally of France. So that cuts off some of its biggest export markets. So all the cloth districts are immediately hurt. Meanwhile, they're still being taxed for the wars. Everybody who, all the workers and people who pay taxes are being taxed for these endless wars. And then there's a bad trade harvest. There's a bad crop harvest. So you have these three kind of things all sort of converge. And what do the industrialists and entrepreneurs do when they see the trade at a point of weakness? Well, they say now's a perfect time to just do even more automation. And they really start accelerating it, trying to throw people out of work when they're already suffering. And at this point, it's just more than a lot of the cloth workers can take. And I should also point out that they've spent the last 10 years lobbying Parliament, saying, look, we need a minimum wage. We need some protections. Can you at least uphold the regulations that are on the book that all these entrepreneurs are tearing up? You can imagine Uber coming into the city and saying, oh, we're not a taxi company, we're a software company, so we don't have to play by the rules. same story 200 years ago. They said, oh, well, we don't need to follow the apprentice rules. We don't need to follow the cloth count rules. We're using technology. The game has changed. And so it falls on deaf ears in Parliament, who just wave all that away and eventually just tear up all the regulations on the books in 1809. So 1811, backs against the wall, the cloth workers turn to this tactic of last resort, and that is machine breaking. And it's not this crude, dumb, like, oh, machine, I hate it, I smash it. No, it is this tactical, this strategic sort of mode of resistance where they spent months and months preparing for this. And what they would do is they start writing letters to the most offensive factory owners in town, saying, we know you've got 100 of the obnoxious machines in your factory, or however many, and if you don't take them down, you'll get a visit from Ned Ludd's army. And if the factory owner took them down, they'd be fine. But if they didn't, then the Ned Ludd's army would in fact show up under the cover of night. Either they'd slip through the windows, or they'd hold the overseer up at gunpoint, and they'd go in and they'd break just the machines that were being used to automate and degrade their work. They'd leave all the other machines in place, they'd smash them, and they would say, if you try to bring them back, we'll return and we'll do the whole place. But if they didn't, then they would be fine. Then they would leave. And this sort of tactic, all these letters would be signed by General Ludd or Ned Ludd and King Ludd even. But Ned Ludd was this fictitious person. He was said to be an apprentice cloth worker, a kid who was overworked by his master and who didn't want to spend every day toiling at his master's command. So he just kind of slacked off, and his master went to the magistrate and had him whipped. He got mad, he smashed the machine, and he fled into Sherwood Forest, where he started building an army. It's probably an apocryphal story, and this is the same district. This was in Nottingham, I should add, from the land of Robin Hood. So there's this tradition of dissent, of rebellion, and Ned Ludd and Robin Hood, they sound very similar, so it's probably just made up to be this mythic figure. But all of these cloth workers start organizing under this banner, and it's this very distributed, decentralized movement, not unlike kind of Occupy or Black Lives Matter today, where you have an objective, you have a tactic, and you have sort of a belief system, and it can be emulated in all the cloth districts across England without any like sort of central organizing committee or anything. So these attacks start ramping up, and it's unclear exactly how connected they were. They probably talked a little bit, but by and large, it's this extremely grassroots movement. It's this extremely sort of but it is also very organized, and it's very ferocious, and it is also extremely popular, because the cloth workers are not the only ones who don't like the factory. They don't like inequality and all these things. So it becomes this huge popular movement where people are cheering the Luddites in the streets as they go about their machine breaking.
And we should say, just so that people get a sense of the book, you basically follow a bunch of different individuals and tell this story through the perspective of different individuals. But give us just a sense, jumping forward, like, how does this era end, more or less? Or does it ever really? I mean, these issues are ongoing, but this particular era where there was like, what brings it to a close, at least that chapter of this dynamic?
Yeah. Well, so initially it's very successful. Some factory owners wave the white flag and have sympathized with the workers all along and have had to go along with it to sort of keep up with the with the most ambitious factory owners and so on and so forth. So they notch some victories, which really scares the crown, really scares the industrialist class. They don't like how popular everybody is. And we talked a little bit up front about this propaganda campaign that was paired with a military occupation. So the three things that really end up crushing the movement are that that military occupation, sort of they start sending just troops. Anywhere there's a Luddite disturbance or a Luddite movement, they just occupy the districts where cloth is made or where there may be targets, and it's actually pretty ineffective for a long time. But you still basically have like garrisoned towns in the middle of England. It's the largest domestic occupation in British history, at least to that point. So tens of thousands of troops, militiamen, mercenaries, and then the crown makes it a crime punishable by death just to break a machine in order to try to subdue the Luddites. Notably, as you said, there's other characters. One person I follow is Lord Byron, and he stands up and gives this big sort of vociferous opposition to this act to make it punishable by death to break a frame. He loses out, but he remains a Luddite supporter, probably the most famous one in the day. So it's a crime punishable by death to break a frame. You have occupied military districts, and eventually the Luddites kind of hit a wall, and when one of them goes too far and assassinates a factory owner, and they start to lose the popular sentiment too. But essentially, they are crushed. They're crushed by the state, and it's again one of the first times where you really see this alliance where it costs the state an immense amount of money and resources to deploy troops to put down the workers who are again fighting for their right to earn a living, to a right to make enough money to feed their families. And the state sides with the industrialists, sides with the tech titans, quote unquote. And those alliances are drawn, and they pretty much hold to this day. And the Luddites are hung and mass when they're finally discovered. There's a big battle that the Luddites lose, and it kind of, the movement is snuffed out by the power of the state, and the resistance and the ethos of Luddism lives on for years afterwards, and sort of sabotage and industrial sabotage is inaugurated as a tactic, and a lot of the strategies and the solidarity are really important in forming sort of middle the working class consciousness, and we can talk about any of those offshoots and that outgrowth, but yeah, they're crushed by the state pointedly.
Maybe the best way to talk about those outgrowths is to, we should note that literally a couple hours ago it was announced that the UAW came to at least a tentative agreement with GM after announcing, I guess it was yesterday or over the weekend, or an agreement with Stellantis. This is on the heels of an agreement with Ford. And it seems like one of the most successful sort of like strikes, union demands in modern history. Maybe at least in the past 50 years, I think maybe for sure in the past 50 years, it seems. 25% pay increase is just sort of like the top line figure over the course of a 3 or 4 5-year contract, depending on, all the details we're going to get a little bit more. But how much of that type of unionism in particular, one that is really sort of aggressive and more democratic. I mean, the UAW had a big sort of, they were under a consent decree that brought about this administration, Sean Fain, which, feels far more democratic, both in structure and processes, but also just in disposition. Like, he is much more in tune to the membership, it feels like, from the outside than we've seen in the past. How much of that is a sort of, I guess, a descendant of the Luddite movement?
Yeah, I mean, so when the Luddites were rising up, one of the reasons they had to rise up, I didn't mention, was that it was illegal to form a union. There were laws on the books called the Combination Acts. So if you, tried to collectively bargain and say, hey, we're all agreed on this, we won't work for this much less rate, you could be thrown in prison. So part of the outgrowth of the Luddite movement was the reform effort that was really spurred by some of the folks that I follow in the book. Gravener Henson, who was a Luddite himself, but also was interested in pulling the levers of reform, and he really fought to the bitter end, and with ultimately some success to get those Combination Acts repealed, and we saw sort of the beginnings of the union movement take rise. But there's a really good lesson from the Luddites in that, you know, so being militant can work. You know, you don't need to actually smash machines, but the industrialists and the sort of the elites of the day were terrified of the Luddites. A lot of them gave in and offered demands because they had power and they were popular. And, you know, we've seen, as you mentioned with Sean Fain and the previous sort of leadership of some of our unions had not wanted to, you know, mix it up too much. They had not wanted to push against the companies. It had gotten pretty slack. So I think seeing these sort of more, I mean, it's not militant, but it's a lot more confrontational. It's a lot more sort of, they're leaning into their power a lot more. And I would also point out, you know, one of the big things was that the companies were trying to say, like, well, you know, we have new technologies, right? Where you're going to be working with batteries and electric cars, and that's not as hard to produce, so we need to pay you less. And one of the things the union did was stand up and say, absolutely not. This is still labor. This is still very labor intensive and skilled work. Just because it's a new technology does not give you the right to say it you know, that you should be paid less or take more work off the table. Same thing with the WGA. I would say that that's another modern example of a very successful Luddite tinged strike, because they saw the studios saying that, well, we want to be able to use AI to write scripts, and you know, and then you can, you know, maybe we'll let you rewrite them for a lesser fee. And they drew a red line. And I argue, and I think I did argue in one of my columns, that that's Luddism in the modern day. You don't need a hammer. You just need to reject what you know is going to be an exploitative use of technology, because they knew the studios were not going to like write a whole movie with AI. They were just going to write a blueprint, bring it to them and say, okay, well, you can get a rewrite fee for this, but we'll own the rights. You don't get residuals. You don't get all this. And it was mostly a way to try to break labor power, to try to degrade conditions. And they drew that red line in the WGA, and they said, no. They said, absolutely not. If somebody's going to use AI, we're going to have control over how it's going to be used. The studio can't do it. We'll make that decision. And kind of amazingly, they won that. They won that right to sort of control that part of the labor process. So that's a huge victory. And I think one that, you know, is extremely inspiring, because we're going to see a wave of these fights coming down.
Do you think that the legacy of the Luddites, or the lessons that come out of there, are that tactic of militancy that they had, or was it did they represent a new way of understanding of the benefits / increase in productivity, and who gets a piece of that, who shares in that so-called benefit? If the sharing of that benefit goes to, you know, all the parties, the constituencies involved in that factory or whatever it is, that production line, or just one narrow beneficiary, or is it both?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a little bit of both, but I think it's more the latter. I think it's saying it is, in fact, like you should be encouraged to question how technology is going to be used in your workplace, in your life, in your daily routine. Like, who is a given technology going to serve? Is it going to serve you, the worker, or is it going to serve your boss at your expense? And it's giving, I think, people license, again, especially, this is really important in this era where for so long we've been taught that progress is equal to technology. It's Silicon Valley is the bringer of all of these, you know, great technological gifts, and, you know, to question or to resist them was unthinkable for so long. I mean, we've seen some of that change with the tech clash and so forth, but there's still a lot of people who are very resistant to even say, like, well, wait a minute, like this seems like an awfully raw deal. And we're seeing that, I think, with thanks to the writers and to a number of the other sort of folks who are pushing back on this right now, we're seeing that facade start to crack, because the Luddites are exactly saying what you pointed out, Sam. It's It's asking if this technology is going to be used for the end of exploitation and giving license to refuse it, to oppose it, to draw a red line, and giving us more say over how we want technology to be used in our lives. Because so often, as you said at the top, it's being used by folks who are hoping to just profit off of it at our expense. It's that simple. If the control only goes to the VC class, to the tech titans of our day, to the managerial class, the people who are using technology for the express purpose of profit, then you can pretty well intuit the outcomes and who's gonna be affected by that. So I think the Luddites have given us a good example and an important example to look at the way that it's being deployed in society or even in our specific workplaces and to question it. And it's okay to question it. It's okay to be a Luddite. And in fact, there's great power in being a Luddite.
Brian Merchant, tech columnist at the Los Angeles Times, author of Blood in the Machine, The Origins of Rebellion Against Big Tech. Thanks so much for your time today. We'll put a link to that at majority.fm in our podcast and YouTube descriptions. Really enjoyed it.
Thanks so much.
All right, folks, we're going to take a quick break. Head into the fun half. Just a reminder, it's your support that keeps this show alive. You can become a member at jointhemajorityreport.com. When you do, you not only get the free half free of commercials, but you also get the fun half. And you get the ability of IMing the show in the fun half. And you allow this show to survive and thrive. You can also help us out by, passing our videos around. Posting us on Instagram. We post on Instagram or Facebook.
Yes.
If some of you folks are still on Facebook, pass us around on Facebook.
I'm trying increasingly. Like I have an Instagram account that I didn't use really much before this, and it's just like Twitter's such a cesspool. I'm trying to post on there as much as I can to get some of this Palestine stuff out because it's just like, where does it even go on Twitter at this point?
Yeah, it's I don't know if I want to get too deep involved in Instagram, but I know there's a lot of people there.
Yeah.
And Facebook, I missed that wave, but there's still a lot of people hanging out on Facebook. And if you're on Twitch, talk us up on Twitch.
Totally.
Use your subscribe, but always subscribe or hit the like button or get a hype train going.
Yeah.
Poggers
to the max, to the moon or whatever. Right?
JustCoffee.coop,
right.
Fair trade coffee, tea, or chocolate. Use the coupon code majority, get 10% off. JustCoffee.coop. Emma, ESPN.
ESPN, yes, well.
Lost year for the Patriots.
I know.
God.
I know. I mean, look, Bill has lost his touch as a general manager, I will say that. But we will be speaking about the very crazy Week 8, the debut by Will Levis that shook up the NFL. Chiefs getting upset, their first ever road divisional loss in the Patrick Mahomes era, if you can believe it, against the Denver Broncos. It's time to switch to Sam Darnold. We'll talk about the World Series too, and then also this tragic incident where this American hockey player, Adam Johnson, died after getting cut by a skate in the neck, and it was a black player who did it, and now everyone is trying to, and by everyone I mean the right, is trying to go after this player. So youtube.com/ESPN show.
Jennifer from St. Louis also reminds us there's a Majority Report subreddit. Yes, in fact, we do know. Folks should check out the Discord and the subreddit. We get a lot of views comes from that our subreddit.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of views on YouTube from there. Matt is out, but folks can check out Left Reckoning. Do you have any details on it, Bradley? Well, you can follow
our
Matt.
panels are out of control, messed up now. I mean, like I'm becoming as
What do you mean?
OCD about this as you I mean,
oh yeah.
Sorry, not to be ableist. It's just
you're becoming a little bit compulsive.
Compulsive, I should say that. Yes.
Right.
I don't like it. We'll have to fix this.
Yeah, no, that's weird. I don't know what's going on. We're gonna.
I'm so angry at Bradley.
Oh, me. Oh, me.
Yeah.
Wow.
Disgusting.
Well, Matt and David were joined by Derek Davison of the Forward Exchange's newsletter and American Prestige podcast to talk about foreign policy in Israel, Gaza, and then also David spoke with I believe Kevin Sanchez of the San Antonio Current to discuss Texas and the immigration policy out in Texas. So youtube.com/Left Reckoning for that, and patreon.com/Left Reckoning to access the post game.
All right, quick break. See you in the fun half.
You are in for it.
All right, folks, 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half.
Are you ready?
Who sent us this?
Anarchy.
Alpha males are back. Boys back. And the alpha males are back.
Just as delicious as you could imagine.
The alpha males are back. Boys back. And the alpha males are back.
Just wanna degrade the white man.
Alpha males are back.
I take all of it in my throat.
Alpha males are back.
Snowflake says what?
The alpha males are back.
You are a madman!
And the alpha males are back.
Oh no, Sam Seder! What a fucking nightmare! Bring back DJ.
Yeah, or a couple of them. Just put them in rotation.
DJ Danner.
Well, the problem with those is they're like 45 seconds long, so I don't know if they're enough of a break.
That's fucking nonsense. See white people doing drugs, they look worse than normal white people, and all white people look disgusting.
And the alpha males,
psych, fuck them. Snowflake says what? Snowflake says what? A hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. Okay, I'm making stupid money. Hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank.
All lives matter. Have you tried doing an impression on a college campus?
I think that there's no reason why reasonable people across the divide can't all agree with this. Psych.
And the alpha males are back. And the Africans are black African. And the alpha males are black. And the Africans are back.
When you see Donald Trump out there, doesn't a little part of you think that America deserves to be taken over by jihadists? Keeping it 100. Can't knock the hustle. Come on! Fuck them. Things I do for the bigger game plan. By the way, it's my birthday! Happy birthday to me, Jew boy! I have a thought experiment for you.
And the alpha males are back. Africans are black. Alpha males are black. Africans are back.
Come on! Come on! Someone needs to pay the price for blasphemy around here.
I am a total pussy.
We're back. Whoa, wow.
Okay, I'm fixing. I mean,
that was different than before.
I'm going to be real with you. You're the one. No. Only one of us needs. Sorry.
No. Just take it easy. I'm just going across this way. All right.
It's like an armed standoff. Like,
know,
hey, whoa.
Only one
I was
of
just
us
centering
can move.
myself.
I'm
not moving. I'm moving laterally, not vertically.
Okay. All right.
So.
I'm sorry for making an assumption.
Yep. There you go.
You know what they say.
What's that?
When you assume, You make an ass of him. You know what I mean? Yeah.
What is tenant media? Someone just sent this.
What
is it? Is it seriously like these guys? I can't tell. It's another conservative. No, I don't know. I'm not sure what that is. We'll check that out. It claims to be a conservative media, but it has a picture of Tim Pool without his hat. And so
I've seen that. I just can't tell if it's real.
well, I'm just saying no conservative media would ever show Tim Pool without his helmet.
No, they wouldn't. They wouldn't.
It would be dangerous. He would bump. He's not allowed to walk out without that thing. That's
yeah.
If he trips, bumps his head.
I mean,
it's a helmet.
protective.
That's what people don't understand. It's a helmet.
Yeah, people don't get that right.
Metal Gears Lime. Have you guys reacted to any Sam Harris or Bill Maher on the Israeli thing? Extremely frustrating, but I think it's good representation of where a lot of normies are. Well, first off, I can tell you that Sam Harris has always, I have not heard anything from Sam Harris in maybe months or, a long time. But I can tell you, having listened to Sam Harris in the aughts and in listening to Sam Harris in the early and mid-teens, I can tell you what I would think that he is saying right now, and I don't need to even know any of that, which is Israel has a right to annihilate all the Palestinians.
Mm-hmm.
The guy is an Islamophobe from way back. Way back. He's one of the OGs. I think he just got a little bit embarrassed when he realized, like, oh, how is it I've created such an incredible following that loves Donald Trump?
Yes.
Surprise, surprise.
And then he said that, Biden won the election and now he is in no man's land in terms of who he's appealing to.
Going back to Islamophobia, always and Bill Maher, and I should say that while Sam Harris was going around, I don't want to say posing as a new atheist, but presenting as a new atheist. And I got nothing wrong with atheists. I don't, to each their own. But while he's going around saying religion is bad, theoretically, his primary place of going on speaking tour was literally the brotherhood organizations of synagogues around the country. Because it turns out, well, believing religion is bad. He thought believing in some religions were bad. And let's be clear. What is going on in Israel in terms of their attacks on Palestinians, civilians? And I know that Joe Biden doesn't believe the numbers, but apparently the Channel 14 in Israel, or what is it? This is a television channel in Israel. They believe the numbers. They pop it up here. Israel wins special coverage. This is, I don't know, from a couple of days ago when they talk about killing 7,546 terrorists. Population wounded 18,000 almost. They put structures attacked over 12,000. They just refer to all Palestinians as terrorists, but at least they acknowledge the numbers of dead, at least at that point, was well into the 7,000s. So, but when you talk about Sam Harris and his blaming of Islam as being the world's, what is it, the single worst idea in the world.
Bad ideas. Yeah. Give me a break.
This is largely about religious fundamentalism, or at the very least, the religious fundamentalists in Israel have pushed the government so far to the right. The ethno-nationalist fascists, who are a little bit more secular, also are responsible. But without a doubt, it's the religious fundamentalism that has pushed Israel into, even worse territory than it's been in the past. I think there's an argument to be made that Zionism in and of itself, if not necessarily leads to this point, certainly rides a knife edge, if you will, that can be tipped into this point rather easily by these type of influences. But if you want to see, where the Israeli government, how they send this message out to those fundamentalists, here's Netanyahu at a news conference in Tel Aviv. And he makes reference to the Bible. Now, of course, like I say, it's a religious country and a lot of religious fundamentalists there. But you what he references is really important.
And you see how the fascists of his ilk, right, are working hand in hand, or at least their aims here are walking alongside those of the religious fundamentalists that you describe.
Yeah, here he goes. He's, go ahead.
You must remember what Amalek has done to you, says our Holy Bible. And we do remember, and we are fighting our brave troops and combatants who are now in Gaza or around Gaza and in all other regions in Israel are joining this chain of Jewish heroes, a chain that has started 3,000 years ago from Joshua ben Nun until the heroes of 1948, the Six-Day War, the 73 October War, and all other wars in this country. Our hero troops, they have one supreme main goal: to completely defeat the murderous enemy and to guarantee our existence in this country. We've always said, never again. Never again is now.
Never again, except, it only means never again for us.
Well, the point about that, him dropping that Amalek as a quote, Amalek, we should say, is Amalek was the sort of, I guess, the in the Bible was a staunch enemy of the Israelites.
1 Samuel 15:3, if people want to look it up.
And what 1 Samuel 15:3 calls for is, now go and smite Amalek and utterly destroy all that they have, and spare them not, but slay both man and woman, infant and suckling, ox and sheep, camel and ass. In other words, annihilate everything. So when he drops this in, you must remember what Amalek has done to you, says our Holy Bible. He's not just saying, he is saying that our mission is to go. Now, maybe it isn't. You don't want to wait and find out after the fact. And it's certainly, the behavior up to this point is consistent with that. But what he is saying to a huge portion of his government that keeps him in power, explicitly, and they all know, they don't have to look up what Amalek means. They all know exactly what it means. It means that our response is going to be to kill everything and everyone: man, woman, infant, suckling, ox, sheep, camel, and ass.
Genocidal language by every measure. And as I mentioned earlier, 800 international lawyers, including genocide scholars, signed a letter last week warning of crimes of genocide in Gaza. That is what we are seeing at this point. So I'm sick of seeing Israel-Hamas war, back and forth, Israel-Hamas war. That's not what we're dealing with. And when, Hamas, the central claim about why Hamas is not a group that should be supported, certainly, and the terroristic acts that they committed should be universally condemned, is that Hamas calls for the eradication of Jews. That's exactly what Netanyahu is saying about Gaza. And to add to the complete insanity of that is that Israel actually has the means to do that because of the advanced weaponry that they have, because Gaza has been under blockade for 18 years at this point, because Israel controls their land and sea borders, because they have the ability to cut off internet access, electricity, fuel, water, babies drinking brackish water right now in Gaza. Because they have the ability to do all of this, they have complete control over Gaza. That is the ability to put systems of of eradication into place, and it's already happening in these weeks that we've seen this. We've been witnessing this horror show. So, like, I'm just sick of this fallback into among many, people in the press, honestly, that Israel is this secular-minded democracy in the Middle East, and that it's the savages on the other side, motivated by religious fundamentalism and bigotry. He just referred to all Palestinians as the Amalek. What are we doing here? And proving it through action.
Without a doubt. Without a doubt. The other fun sort of excuse and sort of mitigating factor that we will hear is that the Israelis, they warn the Palestinian people to watch out. Now, and nobody else has ever done that in the history. Now, of course, that's not true. There are tons of examples throughout history where civilians have been warned that this area or that area may be hit, et cetera, et cetera. But aside from the fact that the Israelis told the Palestinians, move down to the south because we're coming to the north, and they have been bombing, and they admit they have been bombing in the south. And when you cut off water, you cut off electricity, you cut off food, and you cut off escape, there is nowhere to go. But here is an example of why this sort of myth is propagated. And here's another way in which they do it. They release an actual video where they're sending warnings to Palestinians. Now, this would be hilarious if it wasn't so sick, in the sense that there's no electricity in Gaza. They have supposedly, under pressure from the United States, resumed internet access in Gaza, but of course there's no electricity. So anything that was somehow found its way online would be consumed by a very small amount of people. But also, the idea that this is released in English.
Exactly.
For an audience. Now, there's no doubt that Palestinians, some percentage of them speak English. Some percentage of them, I would think even a higher percentage, speaks Hebrew. But this is put out in English because the audience for this is not in Palestine, not in Gaza. The audience for this is sitting in, I don't know, Tenafly, New Jersey, or in, wherever it is, Washington, D.C., or New York, Ann Arbor, wherever it is in the English-speaking world. This is the audience. This is a show.
Attention, citizens of Gaza, listen carefully. This is an urgent military advisory from the Israel Defense Forces. For your immediate safety, we urge all residents of northern Gaza and Gaza City to temporarily relocate south. Let me repeat. We urge all residents of northern Gaza and Gaza City to relocate south immediately. This is a temporary measure. Moving back to northern Gaza will be possible once the intense hostilities end.
Oh, sure.
Hamas puts your life in danger by placing weapons and forces within civilians' area in Gaza, including schools, mosques, and hospitals. The impending IDF operation is set to neutralize these threats of Hamas with precision and intensity. Humanity remains haunted by the massacre unleashed by Hamas on October 7th, a massacre of innocent lives. Israeli men, women, children, and babies were beheaded, executed, raped, and burnt alive. We won't forget that. And the kidnapping of over 200 Israelis, we will not forget. To the residents of northern Gaza and Gaza City, your window to act is closing. Move south. For your own safety, move south. This is not a mere precaution. It is an urgent plea for the safety of the civilians in
All right,
Gaza.
we don't need to hear more about this. I mean, we get the idea. This is literally a
ethnic cleansing.
Well, I'm saying what that clip is.
Yes.
Is an advertisement basically put out by the Israeli government for the sake of public opinion around the world. And
they've been doing that. They put out some AI image of Voldemort and said, and I don't even know what the purpose of it was, but the caption from @Israel, the official account, was Hamas equals ISIS. And I saw people saying, why do they keep saying this? Hamas equals ISIS. Hamas equals ISIS. It's another effort at propaganda to get Western English-speaking audiences, particularly the U.S., also the UK, other governments in North America and Europe that support Israel, for the domestic audiences there to be fearful, like Hamas is coming for me, because ISIS has global jihadist goals, right? Hamas has goals that are obviously bloodthirsty in the way that they massacred those Israeli civilians, but they are regional goals. What the Israeli government is trying to do, and also with the beheading babies thing, which I feel we still have not gotten independent confirmation over, but putting that aside for a second, is evoke that imagery of ISIS for a Western audience to say, like, they're coming on your doorstep. It's coming for you. It's coming for you. Keep funding us. Keep supporting us. Don't listen to what everybody's saying about the atrocities. Don't read the stories of the pediatricians in the New York Times about what the conditions are like here. Continue to fund our efforts, our crimes. Continue to do so. That's what that is for.
I can guarantee you that video will be used in some argument that someone's having as an excuse. It's like, this is what Israel does. They give them warnings.
I've had that freaking argument.
In a language that is probably not widely spoken by the people who are going to see it, in a medium which is almost impossible to access at this point by the people who it's intended to be, supposedly. I mean, it's just sheer theater. That's it. Period. End of story. That's just sheer theater. Truck nuts. Honestly, feeling a little pissed off about Megan Fox tagging SAG in her costume post.
I saw that.
I don't feels rather antagonistic to the union, not to mention unneeded in a time when so many companies are putting out anti-union propaganda. Not sure what she was trying to prove with that.
You want to hear the story? It'll make you annoyed. So Megan Fox, actress who, honestly, I felt like was having a comeback before she started dating that weirdo, Machine Gun Kelly, putting that aside. But
wait, who's Megan Fox?
She's like, at one point,
like the Transformers
arguably
movies.
The hottest woman of the 21st century.
I wish she was sitting right here. I wouldn't have.
Yeah, she was like the fantasy of every boy in 2008 when that movie came out, right? So she was a victim of a lot of misogyny. Yeah, she was a victim of a lot of misogyny. A lot of people supported her. Now she's taken some weird turn and decided to dress up. Like SAG-AFTRA put out that press release saying, don't dress as movie characters in solidarity with the strike. Fairly harmless, who cares? And she dressed up as a movie character as a member of SAG-AFTRA with her boyfriend, posted it and tagged SAG-AFTRA, like mocking them. How edgy. I mean, why don't you go on the Red Scare podcast with that? I mean, that's what the equivalent of it is. It's like getting attention for being transgressive when you're actually just being a dick.
Who's her boyfriend?
A very, very bad musician named Machine Gun Kelly.
I'm not familiar with that either.
A terrible, terrible musician. Like,
I'm not familiar
Musicians
with any of the
actually a
people
little
involved in
kind.
that.
Yeah.
But so I guess I'm not worried about it because that's the beauty of not being on Instagram.
I guess that's true. Yeah, yeah. I tell Sam about my Instagram feuds and fights over Israel Palestine. You like have no idea.
I have friends who are on Instagram and they're like, you have no idea what's going on there.
Oh, I'm
And
in
like,
many Cold
well,
Wars. Yes, yes.
A curious reader. Can MR set up a Goodreads list of books you think viewers should read? I feel like we do have one. Do you all think we are better off with Speaker Johnson, or do you believe we should have kept McCarthy? I think Republicans can have who they want in there, and I don't think. Let me put it this way: I don't think Democrats should have voted to support McCarthy. Although I do think that it's quite possible that had all the Democrats voted to support McCarthy, it would have made McCarthy unstable, and we would have gotten to this point the next week. And then all the grief that Democrats would have gotten for voting for McCarthy would have forced them to not vote for McCarthy this time. I think, look, I think Johnson's going to be a problematic speaker in the sense that, like, he's, I don't know what he's going to do to avoid a government shutdown. Is he going to cause more cuts to happen? I do think he's going to make it harder for Republicans to maintain control of the House. And I think that's a good thing. If I was, Mark Molinari, I would be very nervous in New York's 19th. If I was Lawler, I would be nervous in New York's, what is it? I can't remember what number he's in. There's 18 Republican congresspeople who are very, very nervous about Johnson. We'll see. Pac-Man's Weiner. Does the removal of Trump from any state's ballot set a potentially dangerous precedent? I am a little bit nervous about that, but if the states are going to do what they do, I think it's better to just defeat Trump. But I mean, obviously people have the right to bring these actions in these states. I find it hard to believe that he will be knocked off the ballot in those places.
Agreed.
Bet. Hello, MR crew. Last time Sam asked me to send an email since I had a lot of questions. I've just sent this one this afternoon. But other than those, I would like you to ask you two other questions now. How do you see the current conflict coming to an end? Will the U.S. continue its support? Will the Middle East intervene? Considering that I have recently developed an interest in politics, what books do you recommend for me to gain basic knowledge? Well, I don't know how this conflict comes to an end. I think the U.S. will continue its support, at least, I have aspirations that they'll use their some leverage and try and ratchet down Israel's response. I don't know about that. And will the Middle East intervene? I have no idea. But if you mean like, will Hezbollah get involved? I think there's a real danger of that. Because I've recently developed an interest in politics, what books do you recommend for me to gain basic knowledge?
Of politics?
You got to be more specific, I think. But, the book we were just talking about,
Blood.
Blood in the Machine.
Blood in the Machine.
Would be a great place to start to understand the dynamic of how workers are exploited through new technologies and what's going on today. Just go over the list of. I mean, I think I don't know if there is a single one book to start off that gives you some type of Howard Zinn's People's History is always like a good sort of like easy entry, it seems to me, into certain dynamics. But
on Israel, I did actually just start Ilan Pappy's book, 10 Myths About Israel. So you probably can get that on paperback anywhere. I know Verso Books published it about this particular topic.
Gosh, yeah. People ask that. I don't know what the launching book. Maybe I should just sit down and decide one day so that I have that answer.
Clash of Civilizations? No, not really. No.
Between the 101 and the 5. Serious question. Do you think it's time to start demanding Biden step down over Israel-Palestine? I genuinely think public opinion is changing. I think he'll lose to Trump over this. And I think there's a lot of people who want someone else to run. Is it time? I've wanted someone else to run 8 months ago.
Yeah.
And I don't know if he'll lose to Trump over this. It's not like Trump is staking out a different position. I mean, I think but I don't know if that makes a difference really in the mind of people. I think it's quite possible there are people who are going to stay home because of this. I don't know, but I would love someone else to run. Do I think calling for Joe Biden to step down is going to work? No, I don't.
I want him to revert. I mean, let's be clear too about we have two options. What would this look like if Trump were in office? I don't even know what to think. It's been horrific as of what we've seen, but we wouldn't even have any of those 20 trucks going in. We wouldn't have internet access restored. Trump would say, take Gaza.
Well, look, I'm not convinced that there's been enough examination of how emboldening Trump was via the Abraham Accords, but also the moving of the capital, the declaring Jerusalem the capital and moving the embassy there. What message does that send to the Israeli government? There is no we don't have to tap the brakes on anything. And but look, the idea that it could hurt Biden, I think it's very possible he could hurt Biden. Do I think calling for him to step down is going to change things? No. I do think that pressure on Democratic senators and House members to break with Biden is helpful because they're going to the White House and they're saying, hey, man, we need to start calling for a ceasefire.
Oh, yeah.
This humanitarian pause thing is getting us killed out there.
Call your representatives. I called Dan Golden. He's my representative. That's not,
You ain't getting very far.
But I did, and I had his staffer record it, and I should call Schumer and Gillibrand too, honestly. But but you guys should. Everybody, you can look up you can find the congressional switchboard. You can Google it and just call your representatives. I know it's probably a drop in the bucket, but it also feels good to do something if you're not able to attend a march. If you're worried about what your employer thinks about this, which is a very real thing, just call your representative.
Even just for it to be a data point for them, because I've interned. I interned in a congressional office in New Jersey, but I also interned for Senator Schumer's office in Manhattan. And when you are at the front desk as an intern, you are tallying every single call you get into buckets of categories.
I did that too for Gillibrand. I didn't know you did that when I was 16.
In college, I was, but 1 year. But so basically, any call you get, you are putting it into a category. So they are actually at least somebody is looking at the tallies of what people in ostensibly either New York State constituents or federal constituents are calling about. So.
Right.
I did that for Brian Donnelly from Quincy, Mass.
There you go.
That was he probably retired, I don't know, 25 years ago.
Before or after your vice presidential tenure in high school?
It was after.
He was in Congress from 1979 to 1993, and then was the U.S. ambassador to Trinidad and Tobago under Bill Clinton.
I did not know that. I did not get to take part in that whole Trinidad thing. 10-year drug. If you're planning on playing the Fetterman video, the context for it is that he's hosting a fundraiser for Sarah in Emirato. We haven't seen that video, but we'll keep an eye out for it.
It's in our sound sheet.
Oh, is it?
Basically, someone confronted him about his position on Palestine.
It should also be noted that the local progressives have always viewed Fetterman with suspicion. He's been completely irrelevant to the progressive ascendance happening around Pittsburgh in recent years. Should we play this?
Sure.
It's clip number 8. The other context you should note too is that the APAC and that what is that organization? Their PAC?
DMFI
did not play in the Pittsburgh Senate race, and in part because I think Fetterman was sort of threatened by them. I don't know what his positions would have been in the absence of that, but he's been particularly aggressive, or at least his office has been particularly aggressive and not really seeming to care at all about this stuff.
Especially jarring given his progressive bona fides, or like before that, right? And how he'd positioned himself.
Here is a human rights attorney, Dan Kovalik, confronting Senator John Fetterman at a fundraiser in Pittsburgh.
Support the humanitarian ceasefire. No, I'm with the Gaza team. If I can talk to him. No, I can talk. I voted for him. I'm sorry. This is a democracy. It absolutely is. Yeah, but kind of, sort of. Why? 10,000 people in Gaza have been killed. Half are children. The Pope's calling for a ceasefire. The UN has called for it. I'm just asking you. You're a good guy. I voted for you. I know you're a nice guy. This is important. You need to leave. Here, can I give you a phone?
He just assaulted him. He just assaulted him. He just assaulted him. He just assaulted him. He was just talking to him. He's assaulted him.
Totally insane.
Yeah.
And Kovalik mentioned in a follow-up tweet that he paid to be at the event. It wasn't as if he was just like interloping or infiltrating.
It's amazing how they just threw him out for literally asking a question. They didn't even give him a chance to be obnoxious about it.
Yeah. He was. They were, and also like
he
wasn't even resisting either. It's not as if he was like being physically intimidating to Fetterman, who was a big fella.
Hey, Fetterman wants to. I mean, there are a lot of colleges in Pennsylvania. Just saying, a lot of colleges in Pennsylvania, a lot of young people. And this issue is just rapidly changing public opinion. I can tell you that. Young people understand what this is. They have not bought into the decades and decades of propaganda that has been difficult for a lot of people to unlearn. And I understand that and that those issues, but especially if you're on social media, you see what's happening in Gaza for the most part. Unless you're not, or you're in this massive bubble. So like, Fetterman did have a lot of energy coming from young people in his race, and he better figure this out. I mean, I saw this over the weekend that in the Arab American, which I think is a local newspaper in Michigan, I retweeted it so I can find it as I'm speaking, but they had a headline that over the weekend that they were circulating in Michigan, and this is becoming a concern here, where the headline said, "He lost our votes with Biden." You want to pull this up, actually, Bradley? Thank you. But again, who knows how this pans out, but this should at least, I'm just trying to appeal to Biden's own self-interest and Fetterman's. This should be a concern. The Arab American News at a Middle Eastern market in Michigan, says this person who tweeted this. "He lost our votes" is the headline. "Betrayed by Biden and other Democrats, Arab and Muslim Americans vow we will never vote for them again." And that's not saying they're going to vote for Trump. I don't like that, right? I mean, Trump wanted to do a Muslim ban. We all understand where like the bulk of bigotry lies here. But Biden lost children. He understands what it means to lose your own child. And a child in Gaza is dying every 15 minutes. How is this? How can you sleep at night? I don't understand. But I mean, he's making a political consideration, so I'm making a counter political consideration for him. There are a sizable Muslim populations in swing states, Michigan included, and that if you only care about your own ass, that's fine. Look, but this is also a concern.
I think the counter argument and I just had this. It was not the side that I took in this argument, but I will relay it because this was one of the arguments I had this weekend. Is that Biden is trying to, and Ryan Grimm and I talked about this, and he thought that was also what the thinking was from the White House, and I had this exact argument at dinner last night, that Biden is exercising as much leverage as he has, and it was able to get 20 trucks through, and it was able to get the internet turned back on, and he's maintaining his credibility with them so that he can exercise leverage. And my response to that is, well, like, okay, that's possible, but how do we know that Biden is at the limits? I'm just trying to, steel man the other person's argument. I'm like, but my response to that is, how do we know that Biden is at his limits of leverage when nothing has been taken off the table in terms of like what's going in? All of it is going in one direction. The 14 or 16 billion dollars that Congress is going to do, like, that's not in jeopardy at all. There's no even talk of, like, even momentary talk of that being in jeopardy. We've seen C-130s dropping off up armored vehicles. I would imagine a bunch of other weaponry. We know that we're sending Patriot missiles to Israel. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't or we should send these things, but the idea that Biden has exhausted, what I am saying is that the idea that Biden has exhausted his leverage, how could we possibly say that when none of these things seem to be in any way put on the table in the use of that leverage? And I'm not saying that he needs to say this publicly, but if he's saying it privately, Israel doesn't seem to be responding to it, and those things are not coming off the table. So, like, I don't know how we can say that Biden is using all his leverage. I think there is a lot more leverage. I think there is a finite limit to it, but I don't think that we're there, because if we were there, I think we would see at least something come off the table. You would see Biden go like, I don't know if I can get 16 billion through. It may only be 10 or 8 or 6 or 5 or 2 or 1, or we are committed to providing only defensive weaponry, like, the Patriot, missile defense or whatever it is. The point is that, like, we're not seeing any of that. So I don't think that we've gone to to even near the limits of testing what leverage we have with Israel. And this person was like, well, but that puts Biden in a precarious position. I'm like, first off, I don't know that it does, because of just what you're saying. Like, public opinion in this country, to the extent that it's paying attention to this stuff, and I think to some extent it definitely is not in favor of, it's certainly not overwhelming. Like, it is not in favor of allowing for the annihilation of Palestinians living in Gaza.
It's just not, and we're not going to know fully what public opinion really is for a little while because it's so fluid, but like, early polling indicates that it is trending in the direction that I'm saying, and it's not really ambiguous when you look at the generational divides. And if Biden wants to win re-election, it is about youth turnout, and you can't just rely on negative partisanship about Trump. It's also just the freaking right thing to do.
Lazy Ollie says it's a lose-lose situation for Biden. He will lose voters over the Palestinian issue either way. I think that's true. I think it is a lose-lose situation. I think it's just a question of, like, how do you mitigate your losses? And it seems to me, being far more measured in where you sit in this from Biden's political perspective. Put aside, like, the moral arguments. From a political perspective, I don't I would be curious if someone can point to me a time where a Democratic president lost votes over telling Israel to chill out. I mean, and I leave that little sort of dramatic pause of silence because there isn't one. It's no doubt that it's a lose-lose situation, but I think, Biden coming out and saying enough. We have 7,000 dead civilians so far. Enough. This is not going to work out. Biden might lose the Israeli population, but so what?
I mean, he's going to eventually, we'll see maybe something. Maybe we'll see humanitarian pause, what Bernie said, which was clearly cooked up by somebody like J Street or something to not say ceasefire, whatever. He probably got some directive from the Biden administration saying don't do that.
Without a doubt.
But you have to say something. But then I'll take a freaking humanitarian pause by Biden. Please. God. I don't even, yeah. So, one of the worst news stories we will ever live through. 100%.
This is encouraging. This is like the third video of Jake Tapper's we played in like 2 weeks where I'm like,
yeah,
what's going on with that dude? I mean, he, I've seen videos where he's like been brought to tears hearing stories of Israeli hostage victims and victims of the Hamas attack. But he also seems to be at least, acknowledging the humanity of Palestinian civilians. Even in the context of with Jim Jordan, where he had people come on and they're going to vote for a guy who literally turned his back on.
It was Stefanik, right? Elise Stefanik saying that, or Nancy Mace, I forget who it was, but saying that Jim Jordan, he could get Democratic votes because they trust to work with him. And Tapper almost laughed.
Jim Jordan from Ohio?
Laughed in her face.
Yeah, I mean, Tapper, it's been sort of at least becoming increasingly Republican skeptical, which I find, to be good for him. I mean, I don't want to overstate the case. But here he's talking about the Republican attempt to censure Rashida Tlaib. Basically because she's saying Palestinians are human beings too. We should not allow the Israeli government to slaughter.
Oh, and she has family there.
Palestinian civilians. Here is Tapper.
That's right. It's Marjorie Taylor Greene. And it gets worse because when you read Greene's resolution, you realize
we should say that Marjorie Taylor Greene introduced a resolution to censure Tlaib. Go ahead.
That's right. It's Marjorie Taylor Greene. And it gets worse because when you read Greene's resolution, you realize it is written by someone who seems to have learned about the Arab-Israeli conflict maybe 10 minutes before, who maybe didn't even have access to Wikipedia. And B, while there are plenty of valid criticisms of Congresswoman Tlaib, this resolution twists a bunch of things that she said beyond recognition. And C, the resolution seems much more focused on January 6th than it does on October 7th. Throughout its pages, Marjorie Taylor Greene describes this act of civil disobedience from a bunch of left-wing Jewish groups that are critical of Israel's government, this act as an insurrection. This is not an insurrection. It might be a bunch of folks with whom you disagree. It might be a bunch of people you think are misguided, acting in a way you don't like. But this is not an insurrection. Anti-Semitism is not a cudgel to be used against people for political points. Nor is Islamophobia or racism or anti-gay behavior or misogyny or any other kind of bigotry. Just over 3 weeks ago, 1,400 people, mostly Jews, mostly civilians, were slaughtered here in some of the cruelest and most unimaginable ways in the deadliest day for Jews since the Holocaust. This shit is not a game. Thank you for spending your Sunday morning with us. Fareed Zakaria, GPS, starts next.
He seems not tolerant of Marjorie Taylor Greene stuff. I mean,
I'm annoyed about it a little. It's just like, why do we have? He didn't really say anything substantive about what Rashida Tlaib is saying. Like, I mean, and why is it the only way that we can protect like these members, Palestine, whether it be Rashida Tlaib, who's Palestinian American, or Ilhan Omar, who's Muslim American, and a refugee, a refugee. Why does it have to be like the only way the mainstream press is going to do it is if it's through the lens of criticizing an obviously crazy woman?
Oh, they would never sort of highlight in a positive fashion what they're saying, but at the very least, it is good that someone like Tapper does not give license to the Josh Gottheimers of the world to demonize these people. And here, speaking of Josh Gottheimer attempting to demonize people, here is a clip of Andre Carson. Well, he's being asked by Manu Raju from CNN. Andre Carson is from, where's he from?
Indiana. He's Indianapolis.
A Democrat from Indianapolis. They voted against a so-called pro-Israel resolution. It really was one that also just sort of ignored purposely the Palestinians. And this is also one about with the censure on the campus, that resolution that I don't know. But he is responding to what Josh Gottheimer, and Josh Gottheimer is also, to be fair, not just horrible on this issue, but horrible on just about every other issue within the Democratic Party. In fact, Josh Gottheimer is one of those guys that had the shoe been on the other foot, and the Democrats or the Republicans the Democrats needed 4 or 5 votes to confirm their speaker. Josh Gottheimer would be high on my list for going over and saying, making a deal with Kevin McCarthy. Get me our cola and and by cola I mean the salt tax,
Yeah.
exactly. The get us the salt tax reduction, and I'll make you the speaker for 2 years. But nevertheless, this is the proper response when Josh Gottheimer is brought up, in really in any context, but certainly in this one.
He's cowardly. I think he's not acting in the role as a member of Congress. I think he's shown himself to be very emotional. Like most cowardly people, when you confront them, they're afraid. I'm unafraid of the guy. And if he wants to call us despicable, I'm saying he's a coward and he's a punk. And he should remember why the people sent him here. And if he wants to play some kind of tough guy or gangster, we can handle it like gentlemen, or we can get into something else.
Woo.
There you go.
I mean,
stop LARPing Josh Gottheimer just because Sopranos is from New Jersey.
Yes.
Who are you kidding?
Yeah. I mean, and although Gottheimer's district is kind of where The Sopranos takes place, it's North Jersey, basically exactly where it takes place. But
he is like a bully, though.
You are no Tony. He's a bully.
He's like a petulant bully. It's been reported very many times. He wanted, when Rashida Tlaib came into the house, he wanted to sit her down and have coffee with a binder of all of her anti-Semitic remarks and like yell at her about them. He's harangued like local bloggers for trying to cover events that he's been at. He apparently has a very bad anger problem, according to reporting from The Intercept. Like, he's just like a sniveling little rodent.
Yeah. I mean, and we don't even know what's going on behind closed doors, which makes Andre Carson act that way, except we did have one leak to The Intercept, which says that when they were meeting at the outset of Israel's response in Gaza in the beginning of the mass killings, The Intercept reported that according to 2 sources with knowledge of the meeting, Gottheimer was heard saying, quote, "It's because they're guilty." And that's in reference to Muslims in general. I'm just going to, Muslims who did not attend a vigil in a particular district, speaking about Muslim clerics, Muslims in the United States. According to 2 sources with knowledge of the meeting, Gottheimer was heard saying, it's, quote, it's because they're guilty. So.
Right.
Yeah.
Total jackass.
Right, exactly.
Let's go to the IMs. Tomo Flink. Happy fun-ish Monday, folks. Here in Britain, former Prime Minister Boris Johnson is to become a host on GB News. GB News repeatedly gets in trouble with Britain's press regulator for spreading misinformation. That tracks. Also, Emma, I hope you were able to stay safe at the rally you went to in terms of not getting arrested. I would go to rallies, but my job requires me to abstain from political activities where I can be identified by the general public, so I've emailed my member of parliament twice. Bugatti boys. Glazed nuts, you say? Sorry. No, the news is horrible and serious, but I needed the laugh. Juvenile, though it was. Dave from Jamaica. Thanks to Matt, I viewed Luddites far more favorably. Hasbro is getting so lazy in their nonsense. From what I hear in the Biden camp is hoping people forget. Insane. F. Jake Tapper. Does he really? He still really didn't defend Talib. Yes, I get it, but it does make it harder for folks like a Gottheimer. Majority Report wardrobe coordinator. Nice to see the show get an official sponsor from nuts.com. Sam has been unofficially sponsored by D's Nuts for years. Sam, do you need Emma and Bradley to tell you what Transformers is? No, that is one thing that like Saul, was into it for a little bit, but not that much. I sort of somehow escaped that.
It's pretty right-wing coded.
Courier, 11 seconds. Sam seldom, okay. And Sam's barbed wire. What is Biden's calculation, if any, regarding no ceasefire policy? I think we just said that. Don't forget the Fetterman chasing supposed criminal with a gun incident. Fetterman has shown himself as nothing more than a populist mouthpiece. Lefty, careful with that Fetterman clip. 2 big songs in the audio. YouTube gonna get you. Well, whatever. The reason we can't even have a humanitarian pause is that any aid rendered to Gaza will result in those rendering screaming for a ceasefire based on the aftermath of the brutality they will surely witness. I think there's a lot to be said for that. That Israel's strategy is blackout, blackout information. And the blackout of that information is because as much as there is a turning a world opinion against Israel now, when it becomes more clear what's going on in there, it's just only going to get worse for Israel. This is the baseline. And I think I'm going to make a couple of predictions here. One, if Israel continues with this, you're going to see them leak more footage from October 7th as a way of sort of like mitigating or whatever it is, what they are doing or have done in Gaza. There's going to be a lot more of that. And they're just not going to allow people in. They're not going to do that.
Doctors are pleading to get in through Egypt. I saw this morning. Doctor on Democracy Now! Trying to get in, who's done work in Gaza before. White man. Maybe then.
No.
Maybe then Israel. I mean, what do we, like? Everyone read the read what the Palestinian pediatrician just wrote in the New York Times today.
Oh, absolutely horrible. Absolutely horrible.
There's apparently other news out there.
Oh, tomorrow we're going to talk to Jane McAlevey Wednesday about the UAW strike. We're gonna have a guest on soon too to more talk about that. But that UAW strike seems to be now, as of this morning, resolved across all 3 of the big 3. Or at least tentatively. But if what we're reading about the tentative agreement is accurate, it seems like it was a huge win for unions. But let's also talk about the Republican presidential campaign.
Oh yes. We lost a good soldier.
We lost a good soldier in the Republican campaign. Do we have can we play taps or something like that? Here is
Or a hymn. I mean, we lost a holy warrior, honestly.
That's true. Well, with Mike Johnson in as Speaker of the House, America has its hugely powerful theocrat. So Mike Pence became a little redundant. Here's Mike Pence saying goodbye at the Republican Jewish Coalition Leadership Summit in Las Vegas.
I just couldn't sit this one out. But the Bible tells us
that
there's a time for every purpose under heaven. I'm traveling across the country over the past 6 months.
Oh, pause it. I have read the Bible, and I can tell you what that means is I ran out of cash. I couldn't get anybody to donate any more money. I ran out of cash. Go ahead.
I came here to say it's become clear to me. This is not my time. So after much prayer and deliberation, I have decided to suspend my campaign for president effective today.
Mike, no.
Now I'm leaving this campaign, but let me promise you, I will never leave the fight for conservative values, and I will never stop fighting to elect principled Republican leaders to every office in the land. So help me God.
Best response he's had about anything on that campaign was his dropping out. Honestly, all those ohs and ahs that you heard were just people who were like, wait a second, why did I pay to come to this event?
Yeah.
I thought I was going to get to see a presidential candidate, and now I'm not getting the chance to see that. I want my money back.
Yeah. And we're aligned. I mean,
you know
the
why it's in
Republican
Vegas?
Jewish coalition, right? I mean, I'm sure they're talking about we gotta kill all those Palestinians.
Without a doubt.
I mean, Mike would be maybe the #1 Republican presidential candidate who'd be arguably the most bloodthirsty on that front, because he sees it as a holy war if Pence were to be in office.
Possible. Very possible. I think the reason why this thing is in Vegas, too, is probably because of Sheldon Adelson. Probably was one of the big givers back in the day, and when he passed away.
Mike's wife allows him to go to Vegas? Hope she's there. Too much temptation.
Probably stay in the
There's a lot of temptation.
It's especially sad because Mike is like the kind of in past kinds of presidential races, he would have been considered one of the front runners given the order of primaries, because Iowa comes first. Like, that's supposed to be a guy like Mike's bread and butter, but no one cares.
No one cares
because that's where a lot of evangelicals are. But it's Trump's party. He's just living in it or hanging around in it.
Should we do Ron DeSantis?
Yeah, this one's he's actually quite bad at politics and very untalented.
Well, the good news is it's showing up in his numbers, and therefore he won't walk into a situation that he can't handle. Like, you don't want one of those situations where you're really bad at politics and then you accidentally get elected president. That's not going to happen to Ron DeSantis. Here he is on Meet the Press with Kara Welker, Kristen Welker, I should say.
Going after Nikki Haley, right? In this clip, is this the one? Or
this is the one about him censoring Palestinian groups.
But there's another part of this interview we don't need to play. I just find it notable that he's attacking Nikki Haley.
He has to. He's losing in Iowa now.
He's in the race for like the most distant second, as if Trump is the literal incumbent. That's how big the gulf is right now.
response.
Well, let me ask you about some of the statements that you have made recently about those protesters. This week, you called for the banning of pro-Palestinian groups from Florida state colleges. Your Republican challenger, Vivek Ramaswamy, says that violates the First Amendment rights of these students. He writes, quote, "It's a shameful political ploy. It's unconstitutional. It's utter hypocrisy for someone who railed against left-wing cancel culture." What is your response to Mr. Ramaswamy?
This is not cancel culture. This group, they themselves said in the aftermath of the Hamas attack that they don't just stand in solidarity, that they are part of this Hamas movement. And so, yeah, you have a right to go out and demonstrate, but you can't provide material support to terrorism. They've linked themselves to Hamas, and so we absolutely decertified them. They should not get 1 red cent of taxpayer dollars. And we also have strong laws in Florida against fundraising for groups like Hamas, and we are enforcing those vigorously. It's not a First Amendment issue. That's a material support to terrorism issue.
Yeah, just to be clear, you're citing the Florida law that says one cannot give material aid or resources to a terrorist organization. Do you have any support that they're actually doing that?
Their own words are saying they're part of this organization, that they don't just stand in solidarity, that they don't just support what they did, but that this is their movement too.
Pause it. Incidentally, for those of you who don't have a dictionary, material support is specifically not rhetorical support. So if your evidence that someone is providing material support for an organization is their words, then you have no evidence of material support. You just have people words. And the words he's saying is that, like, they're part of the movement. It's not even like, it's one thing if they went out and said, like, we're sending your dollars to Hamas. And I don't even know if then there's not even evidence. There's just sort of like circumstantial evidence.
Yeah, but sometimes
there's no
words...
evidence of material support when someone says, like, I'm part of this movement. That's absurd.
But sometimes words can be so terroristy that they become material, you know? And that's what free speech absolutists think.
Exactly. This guy, it is exactly cancel culture. And again, it's like what I've been saying. The real reason why it's not cancel culture is because cancel culture is only when non-reactionary forces actually shame people. That's what cancel culture is. This is just like the same old, same old. Remember, there is in 25 states a law that has been on the books for years now that has said that if you have a government contract in any way, let's say you're a speech therapist in Texas, and the school hires you to do speech therapy for elementary school kids who have trouble, I don't know, they have trouble articulating things. You are, by law, in the state of Texas, and in, I think, like it's about 24 other states around the country, forbidden from protesting against Israel. That's not a lie or a joke. That law has been on the books for years in all these states where they talk about 35 states.
Anti-BDS laws as of 2021.
You're not allowed to boycott products from Israel.
Oh, it was called anti-Semitic. And then there's like, why didn't the Palestinians and the supporter of Palestine, why weren't they so peaceful in their demands?
Why don't they try to do some protests like Gandhi?
Yeah, why don't they do
Because he was
marches?
literally outlawed in some states in this country.
And then in Israel, in Gaza, they did protest walks 2018, 2019, Great March of Return. Google it. Israeli snipers killed hundreds.
It's cancel culture only when somebody other than reactionary forces in any way, like even publicly, decries your speech. This is statutes, and that had nothing to do with anything that's happened.
their own words are saying they're part of this organization, that they don't just stand in solidarity, that they don't just support what they did, but that this is their movement too. So once you hitch your wagon to a group like Hamas, that takes you out of the realm of normal activity, and that's something that we're going to take action against. So we believe we're totally justified within the law, and I think things like this have been litigated time and again. But
no one red cent of taxpayer dollars going to Hamas. It's so stupid. I love, like, at some Florida schools where they're organizing little demonstrations, or I don't know, this could be 10 kids in a drum circle, and he's saying that money from them is going to Hamas. Red cent of taxpayer dollars. So first we have to think that because it's a state-funded school that permits group activity on college campuses where they're advocating for Palestinian rights, that's the equivalent of wiring money to Hamas? Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm sure there's a lot of those guys who thought Ron DeSantis, very brave guy, are coming out complaining about his cancel culture now. His wokeism, his anti-wokeism, his censoring. Big beef. Talked to my evangelical Christian father over the weekend. More than any concern over innocent lives, Palestinian and Israeli expressed joy over the alleged fulfillment of biblical prophecy. The Zionists are coming from inside the house, and they don't care how many bodies pile up as long as Jesus comes back. Free Palestine, left is best. Jury duty. Did you see that Reporters Without Borders put out an analysis concluding that Israel's bombing of clearly marked press vehicles that killed a Reuters photojournalist on the Lebanon border were indeed two separate precision strikes that were clearly targeting the press, and that there didn't appear to be any way they could have been mistaken as combatants. The IDF flew a helicopter over their clearly labeled vehicles right before the strike. Same has happened with an Al Jazeera journalist in Lebanon a few days prior. Biggie, Baltimore. It's disturbing when it takes a tragedy, hits that those, when it only affects them directly. It's even more disturbing how so many people can see this happen in their own town and still argue that people have a right to their gun. The hidden one, to quote Bill Hicks, in order to have a war, there have to be at least two armies fighting. Nutty Dan, as someone born in 2000, I didn't live much through a iPhone-less society. As people living through this change, was life a lot different before smartphones and easy internet access? Yeah. In many respects, it was different.
Sometimes you'd have to go to the library to go on a computer at the beginning of things.
Yeah, you'd keep the World Book of Encyclopedias because you want to look stuff up. Yeah, it was very different. I mean, the thing is, you don't grab onto it. But I remember having conversations early in the early 90s about what's going to happen with digital natives. Everything that we could think of was totally linear. You couldn't move to the left or right in your thinking.
Right.
Or at least in your research. You had to sort of go there was a Dewey Decimal System at the library. You had to use that. And if you wanted to find one book, you'd have to go to one book and then to another book and then to another book. You couldn't. Things are much more you can move horizontally. Hello, I'm our crew. May I have a shofar for my partner who died unexpectedly last week. Our first date, we bonded over our love for your show. My partner, Ryan, was an environmental lawyer who loved helping others with everything that's going on in the world, plus his death. I've been going through hell mentally and emotionally, but the show has been getting me through all these hard times. I just want to tell all of you thank you. I'm so sorry to hear that.
Sorry.
Ashley in St. Louis. So sorry. This is for Ryan. Demian, do people feel nervous that Christian Zionists are super excited about their deaths when the rapture comes? Isn't that the whole thing about Christian Zionism, that Jesus comes back and Israel will be entirely destroyed? My understanding, and I've talked about this in the past, is that 2/3 of Jews will return to Israel or Palestine, and get enveloped in eternal hellfire.
Okay, so
Well,
white
one
phosphorus?
third
Sorry.
will sit on the right-hand side of God, and I have I have eczema,
Okay.
and eternal hellfire is actually one of the worst things for eczema, and so I've requested right-hand side of God.
Did you get a note from your doctor?
I've got one from my doctor. Yeah, I keep that in my pocket, so that when I'm lifted out of my shoes,
Mm-hmm.
I still got the
That's
got the
good.
doctor's note in my chest pocket, and I'm hoping I can just flash it or put it on a bracelet. All right, 5 more of these, and then we'll get out of here. I was going to get to ESVN today. See, I remembered. Pasta time. Troy, New York has given money to replace lead pipes, but hasn't. Only good Megan Fox movie is Jennifer's Body. I don't even.
That is a good. It was before its time.
None of that did I ever heard of before. Nick in Japan, quick correction. Last week, an IMer said that George Bush has a course on great courses. Actually, it's on Masterclass, which is pretty on brand for them. All right, fair enough. BJ Arn from Denmark. I have followed American politics for years. I have seen the Republican Party going further and further down the fascist route, and the more and more I believe that America is a lost cause. If you do not get rid of the single person representation district elections, you will be stuck in the swamp of the two right-wing parties, where the only difference is that one party is okay with people being gay or person of color, but still you guys give me hope for a future where my biggest fear is not the American rights last for world destruction. I'm not sure I follow all of that, but I get your point. We have some structural problems without a doubt. Lulu, I generally agree with the harm reduction approach when voting, but I think Biden really sunk his chances of winning a re-election with his support for Israel. A lot of people on the left are especially disheartened after this, and he'll be remembered in history as supporting the Israeli genocide of Palestinians. Yeah, it's pretty hard to argue with that argument. Someone once asked me years and years ago, like, would you vote for someone who promised, who would you vote for? The person who said, I'm going to build 10 concentration camps or 5 concentration camps. And for me, it would be 5, assuming that the numbers are the same in each concentration camp. And I find what Biden is doing to be reprehensible and disgusting and unforgivable. But I don't know. There's members of the State Department who are complaining. There are people who are resigning. There's Democratic staffers who are sending letters. I mean, I find it horrible what Bernie Sanders is doing. These are calculations that politicians make. And I'm still going to vote. I mean, in New York State, I may vote slightly differently. But I'm still going to vote in a way in which is going to bring me the most likely to bring about my desired outcomes, because that's what voting is.
Yeah.
That's what voting is. End of story. Exactly. I mean, there really is not a lot to think about, it seems to me, in terms of voting in that way, in whatever way. Morpheus. Biden could very easily say something like, replenishing the Iron Dome is our top priority for Israel's defense. We do not need to give them offensive weapons, full stop. I agree. All right, 4 more. Kowalski. Howdy, I'm a majority report. Harvest is coming along well. Production's above average in the USA and abroad. Mostly fertilizer costs are a bit high. The shortage seems to be going away thanks to the IRA investments in production facilities. Corn ethanol is performing as intended. Its purpose as a price floor for farmers. We see oil prices rise. Increase in ethanol production has also helped offset rancher inputs, with more distillers' grain offsetting the loss of grazing from the drought. Aside from high interest operating loans, things appear to be all right despite historic weather conditions. This obviously doesn't help the grander issues of the monoculture and the financialization of the food system, but in the world we live in, it's the best news you're probably going to get. Also, with current news, I would ask everyone not to purchase food from Israel. Their exports are dependent on irrigation systems that deprives Palestinian farmers and villagers from water to irrigate their own crops and broadly drink. Israeli cheeses require Palestinians to suffer, and that doesn't even include land theft or ecological issues of desert agriculture. Left is poggers. All right, 2 more. PP. Can we see that clip where Dave Rubin leaves the show he's on because that woman asked if he debates Sam? That was great. We already played that.
Did that happen on Friday? He left over a question?
Well, I don't know if he left or he was about to leave, but he got pretty testy with this young woman.
I mean, Dave's like pretty
He was
irrelevant
sad.
at this point.
It was sad. Final I am of the day. From Jerv, I can't believe Mother allowed Mike to go to a place called Sin City unsupervised.
Yes.
Bradley, great job
Got it.
today.
Sorry.
Matt in Abstentia, great job today. Emma, great job today. See you folks tomorrow.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the light bar. But finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light shining bright. I get somewhere the choice was made, for the option where you don't get paid, for the road that bends before it finally breaks you. I guess somehow I lost my drive between the 101 and the 5. Do you know how far the detour takes you? Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light shining bright. The months drifted into years while I shifted in and out of